what we thought would be good for today is like studio budget. So not necessarily pricing products, but like how to set up your budget for your studio and how you do it and what's your procedure. And it took me a week to go back and try to find my paperwork that I did in 2015 to set up my budget, and I've tweaked it a little bit every year, but I've never done like a full like overhaul of the whole thing. So since everything is um changing prices and payroll now, I got, there's 3 full-time employees, including myself, for Mindy, Shelly, and I. And so, and a part-time person, I'm like, I really need to redo this because I had like 5 part-time people and myself, which I wasn't even paying at the time. So things have really changed on that front. So yeah, Mindy, is someone trying to get in?
Lisa just came in.
Okay, cool. So you guys might have things in place for sure. And so I thought, you know what, since I was trying to do this in January, but I also had surgery. So I did not get that done. So I'm going to try to do it here in February, but I need to do an overall studio budget so that I can and you probably should do it every year. But you know, get things set in place. It's hard to change it sometimes. So that was what I was thinking. And I made a little form to kind of lead the
But
discussion, but
you made a form?
I found the form and I told Mindy to make a spreadsheet for me. And so she did. Because we all know how much she loves spreadsheets.
Spreadsheet queen.
Some things never change. All right. So why don't we start by everybody just kind of giving a brief, like, what do you do for your studio budget? Do you have a studio budget? And when I'm talking about this, just make sure we're all on the same page. The studio budget would include like your rent or your mortgage, your equipment costs, professional education, your marketing, like what you set aside for all of those different things, payroll, legal fees, travel expenses, etc. So do you have anything? Do you use a form, or do you just kind of put it all in one pot and then pull from that? So what do you guys do?
I don't think mine is as I'm sure you're surprised to hear that I don't have a form or a Google spreadsheet that does mine. I do try to keep my my studio expenses because I do rent a studio. I think some of those things are relatively stable. The rent is the same. It's increased slightly and things like that. I think the marketing budget is probably where I fluctuate most, and a question of, what I'm including in my marketing budget in order to justify some of the things, or at least, realize that it's not a question of marketing doesn't have to just be ads. Of course, it can be networking and things like that too, offering shoots to influencers, however you choose to do it. So I think that's probably the part that fluctuates a little bit for me. I have tried Facebook ads in the past and never really done anything apart from in the very, very early days where I did a Google ad. And one of my goals is to explore Google ads more. So I don't know if any of you have any experience with that, putting some of your marketing budget towards Google ads. But that's something that I would like to explore a little bit. But I have to admit, I'm not super, like, I can't spend over 10% of my revenue on this or that. I tend to kind of wing it a little bit more, which I probably shouldn't, but I do.
All right. That's good. I mean, I did that when I was just like the main person in the studio and I didn't have any employees. It really hit me when my husband did our taxes and he's like, okay, you made $8 this year. And it was when my son was little and I had quit teaching and I was like, oh, that's not gonna get him into like it's fine right now because he's not eating food. He's, he's still nursing. He has no costs really at all. So it was really a wake up call. And I'm like, I could work one day at Walmart and make more money. So
Mhm.
I really had to like buckle down and figure out how to do that part of it. And that was before I had Mindy to help me though. So all right. So Isaac, what do you do?
So, the variables for me changed after my employee Andrew left. But where the budget I have is a little haphazard, but it is built off of the idea of figuring out our pricing. You mentioned this is not like a pricing conversation as much, but that's where we developed is starting with kind of a budget of here's the
Mhm.
utilities, here's the employee costs, the payroll, all that stuff, insurance. So I built a sheet off of that, and it gives me basically the yearly of what we need to aim for, and it's not so much as it should be. It's not so much a thing that I am constantly checking and making sure we're hitting. I don't like Janet. I don't have a thing that's dedicated to I'm going to spend this much marketing dollars this year. But yeah, so it's haphazard with a little bit of structure.
Well, and I'm not a big budgeter. I'm a personal budgeter. In
Mhm.
my business, I don't budget as much. But what I would say and what I would ask, like of each of you, I think in order to budget or to even get started, it's so important to just track stuff in the first place.
Mhm.
So I think that's usually where so many people get really hung up is just not having the data. So they really don't know where their numbers are. So then it's hard to determine the budget because you don't know where you've been. So, I mean, that's what I see I work with a fair amount of photographers and, that's one thing that I see. And I know for myself too. So I track everything through QuickBooks and I watch, my numbers. I know kind of what my percentages are for gross profit and those sorts of things, but I don't hold to a budget. But I do, just in terms of, my expenses are fairly consistent and have been for a lot of years. And of course, I don't have an employee and those sorts of things, but I'm looking at, trying to hire somebody to help me with some social because it's just the bandwidth I don't have. But um, I think like doing an annual review of just even subscriptions. I mean, we know how many subscriptions we're all paying for. And I think whether that's something that you have in your budget line every month, for all those different things or not, just even being aware of when they're coming due, do I need it? What's that per month? I mean, I think so many of those costs sneak up. I don't know if you guys are like me. It's like I get the emails. I'm like, holy shit, that just renewed again. You kind of get snuck up on, and for whatever reason, it's probably because I started my business in the winter. I've got stuff coming due every February, March that I'm like, holy moly, like, my website, all the things at once, which no big deal, but you got to plan for it if you're not. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that that's really that's the key there too, is like making sure you track your expenses and kind of know what's coming up so you can plan for them. But some of those things, like those subscriptions, are very sneaky. Not sneaky as in, that they're suddenly popped up, but it's sneaky because you don't know that you're paying for those things necessarily if you're not tracking it. So
I know I'm paying for them and I get mad every month, and then I usually
Mhm.
wait about a year before I cancel.
I've been guilty of that too.
I use it
Really
once
should
and then
cancel
wait a
that.
year to cancel it. Yeah,
I really should cancel that. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm paying for that. I really
every
should
month.
cancel that. Yep, same.
well, I know. And then especially like, I'm not shooting as much anymore, but to kind of want to get rid of the things, because it's like, well, when I do, I want to have it. I want to use it. So I would recommend just even having a spreadsheet with all those things on it and even just knowing what that equates to a monthly nut.
Mhm.
So at least you're, aware of it because sometimes it does kind of sneak up on you. And I've had a couple, I think it was Filter Pixel that I tried last year that they gave me a free trial. I didn't ask for it, any of the things. I never signed up for it. This year I got a charge on my credit card. I don't even know
Mhm.
how that happened because I never gave them my credit card. Of course, I disputed it with my credit card and I've never heard anything back from it. But some of them are a little sneaky too, to your
They're
point,
very
Jody,
sneaky. And that first year is totally within your budget. And then all of a sudden you're like, to Isaac's point, you meant to cancel it and you didn't, and
Right.
lo and behold, it like tripled in price too. So the double whammy. I definitely hear you on that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like Isaac, like I have like these ideals and I have things on a plan, but then when the expenses, like something comes up, I'm kind of fluid in where I spend the money. I wish I was a little more careful, but you all know, like we went through in vitro fertilization for our children. And so when we needed to do that, we had to budget in our personal finances, like basically 40,000 a pop to try. And so we didn't want to go into debt. So we didn't know where to start necessarily. And we were, we never had credit card payments. We had the month, we just paid it in full. We never carried a balance or anything like that, unlike probably most Americans. So I knew that when I started my business, I wanted to make sure that I continued that. But we went through the Dave Ramsey program, and that was really awesome because that helped us with our personal finances, and we were able to cash flow all of our IVF treatments, which was about 120,000 all in total. Cash. So we went through and we just really stripped everything out of our life. I mean, we were at that time, of course, paying like for TV and even a newspaper and, things like that were things back, 20 some years ago. But that kind of taught us on our personal life. And so then when I was like with the studio, I was like, you know what, as much as I need a new camera, like I'm not going to buy it until I have money in the bank to pay for it, or a new computer, because I didn't want to carry I didn't want to have to pay interest to somebody else. So that was really, and we had just got out of we've paid off all our student loans and everything through that whole time of also paying for children. So I was like, okay, we're going to make this happen. I got to do that. So that's really was my kind of mindset when I started the business, or really was like, I got to make this work as a business. And I do have a spreadsheet that Mindy made. So Mindy, why didn't you, I shared it with you guys in the chat. So if you want to look at it, if you want to share yours,
It
budget.
says you need to request access to
Oh,
view.
Just a second, let me reshare it. She
Oh.
copied it. I was playing with the permissions, so.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
and
she's
Jody,
gonna,
go ahead.
there's another, I don't know, I've been listening to, kind of digging into the psychology of money and, money making decisions and things like that. So I got led to this guy, Ramit Sethi, I guess I butchered the name. But I guess about a couple of years ago, he has a podcast and a book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And he talks about your rich life. And basically, like we know with our clients and talking about them that, where they place value is where they spend their money. The same with us in our lives, designing your life in what you feel is the definition of rich, not necessarily just financially, and then planning accordingly, based on that. And so he has a really interesting approach that, you could couple with, like a non-debt mindset.
What's the name of the book again, Lisa?
I Will Teach You to Be Rich.
Great book. Great book.
Yeah, I've heard him on some podcasts too. He's intriguing.
Yeah.
He is. And it's interesting too, if you listen to a lot of his interviews on the podcast, how he breaks down their relationships and things like that. It's just been relevant in my life lately, but it also gives you some insight into some of your clients and, maybe how they think too.
Well, Jody, you mentioned the Dave Ramsey thing, and I've been following him for years too. And actually that's his principles are what helped my husband and I get our shit together, 20 some years ago. And we weren't in trouble, but we were in that place where we were like, we make way too much money to feel this broke.
Mhm.
And we were both in corporate, and that was before I had a photography business. But you know, one of his big things, which I think is relevant no matter if you completely subscribe to his programs or not, is just the first thing he tells people to do is dream. Like, get
Mhm.
together and dream what you want your life to look like, you know, and that's one of the things that I really talk with small business owners about all the time, is just because it's like we get into the small business game because we have this, you know, dream of what we think it is, right? Whether that's all this time freedom or doing what we want, or, you know, whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
But so often it turns out to be this pit of constant work and burnout and whatever that has not served the life that we got into it to create, you know.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things that I always tell people, and it goes back to Dave Ramsey, just basically saying you and your spouse need to sit down and dream, and you need to decide what it is you want your life to look like, because unless you have that dream, it's easy to just lay down the credit card, throw out the cash, whatever, because you don't have that bigger vision for what you're going to do with that money. I mean, when we
Mhm.
were, you know, paying off, you know, the $1,500 a month in car loans we used to carry, um, it was a lot easier to say, nope, I don't need a new car when I know that I've got a bigger dream. Or no, I don't need that $5 a day habit at Starbucks because I want to get this freaking Tahoe paid off, you know, or whatever it looks like. But, you know, that dream thing is a huge component of it that I think gets lost so often.
Mhm. You're
Mhm.
right.
I think it's also lost more and more in our society because um my husband's been talking about this to me. He says everything's a subscription. So not only those subscriptions that we have of software things, but like people are not paying, they can't buy houses, they're renting. That's basically a subscription, you know. So there's all these like cars, they're, you know, it's you don't own it, you're just leasing it. So like that might be important to somebody, that's fine. But our whole life then it's not, he's like, it's not like America anymore. You know, back when all the immigrants came over and they're like, I want to own a piece of land. I'm going to like make this land and build a house and a home. And, you know, somebody who had no ability to do that back in their home, they were so amazed, like they could own something, a piece of something here. And he says it's so sad because these younger, you know, in their 20s and 30s, like they just, it's so, Isaac, I know you're in that group, but owning something like,
The
you
young'uns.
know, a lot of people in that age group just aren't able to own anything anymore.
Well, and I don't know that it's necessarily able to own it, but it's where you value your freedom.
Yeah.
You know, because I've seen, especially in the past couple of years, we've been leasing, we sold our house, paid off debt, all of that. The freedom lies in not owning a house.
Mhm.
It lies for us in paying more in a lease, but not having to maintain it. And then once our lease is up, we're not stuck trying to sell a house. We can pick up and move somewhere else. Whereas someone else may value that piece of land and staying in one place, you know, for years and years. But again, going back to that dream of, you know, what you want your life to look like and where you find that freedom.
Mm.
It's a good
Yeah.
point.
But
Well,
also that you own your own business. So it's not like you know, you don't have something that you own. You know what I mean? That I didn't mean it that way, that you
Right. No. Yeah. And I didn't
But there
take it that
is-
way. It
Yeah.
just went circled back to the freedom conversation and the dream that Deb was referring to. You know, and that I guess a lot of the younger generation, you know, maybe from what you're saying, likes to be able to pick up and do different things, and they're working remotely, so they're able to travel more and you know, not have to be in one particular location. So it has just changed the dynamic of a lot of the workforce and culture as a
Yeah.
I
whole.
agree. I agree. I mean, 50 years ago, you got a job for life, right? You know, you didn't necessarily move across the country. You didn't necessarily move to a different country, you know, so that American dream of having your own home and working for the man down the street, that was kind of part of it. Not, and you didn't need to think about the fact that that house was to a certain degree tying you down. Because as you said, Lisa, you know, it's much easier to pick up and move to a different town as your circumstances have changed. Like you've had one go to college, you know, and your circumstances have changed. You've been able to pick up and move and pivot because of that, because you haven't had to been tied into the American dream of owning your own home. But I do think it's you know, everybody's dream is different, right? You know,
Right.
my dream is different from all 5 of you on the screen there, just based on circumstances, where you are in the stage of your life. But nonetheless, identifying that dream, I think, is very important. Deb. I do like that kind of,
Mhm.
you know, step back and take a minute and say, okay, well, what am I working for here? Because as you said, Jody, you know, when you get down to the point where you're like, okay, well, for all this effort, for the money I take out, could I actually work for Banana Republic and have some really great clothes at discount?
Yeah.
I mean, that's has to be a question that we really ask ourselves, right? You know, would that actually take a lot of stress out of my life? You know, I think it's so easy to get wrapped up in that be your own boss thing. And as we all know, there are good and bad aspects. of
Right.
it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody has, you know, someone in their family that has a different mindset
Mhm.
of, okay, it's more of a freedom and a comfort for them to work in, you know, corporate or say a state job and
Mhm.
work for the retirement, you know, for when they're 63 or whatever it is now. Whereas, you know, we're maybe more of the mindset of that may not be there. Let's live our life now. And it's more freeing to not have that tying you down.
Mhm.
Well,
Agreed.
that's the thing. And I think you said a mouthful. I mean, the dream is different for everybody. And I think it's relevant to note that it's not the same for everybody. And there is no one answer. But what really matters is that you know what your dream is, you know, and that
Mhm.
whatever you're doing in your life is actually, you know, moving you forward in your dream. Because I think so often we get caught up in this lane of what we think we're supposed to do because it's what our parents did, our sisters did, you know, whatever, what
Mhm.
the person we admire down the block does. Well, I think if we've learned anything in the last few years, hopefully it's that things are different. You know, things have changed. And I think we have most people now looking at life a little bit differently, and whether they're taking the time to dream and make the plans, I'm not sure yet. But this conversation that we're having, I think, is very important because it, if nothing else, it brings us back to what do we want, you know, and maybe we do want the house and the American dream, or maybe, you know, I'm looking at the stage of my life where I'm like, you know, I want to travel more. I want to do some things. I still want to have my house, but I'm glad that it's paid for. It's not a burden, all those sorts of things, you know, and what does that mean for me? What do I need to live going forward to fund the lifestyle that we've decided we want to live? I mean, that's what's important to me right now. It's like, how much do I need to work to get what I want and need? And what do I want it to feel like? Because I'm not willing to do what I was even 5 years ago for that dream anymore. Like the stress of the job I used to have and all the BS that went along with it. Hell no, I'm not doing it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You know, I'm doing things that I want to do now, which those things come in different seasons of life. I totally get that. But I think being able to look forward into the end game and know how you want to get there, you guys are all in a very amazing, have an amazing opportunity to direct how you want to get there because you're in control. It's your business. You know, that's the beautiful thing.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely think there's like kind of two goals. You have a personal goal that you have with your spouse and your family, like what you want to do and how you want to get there. But then there's also like kind of your business goals too, like, you know, and they both work together. Like, how are we going to get there? You know, what are my business goals? Okay, now what are, and, you know, taking care of employees or, you know, whatever, if you have that. And then also, how are you going to get there? And what do you want to do for your family? You know, what are your family goals? So, yeah, we're
No,
definitely,
I know there's a lot of coaches and a lot of books that you read. I know there's the profit first or whatever, that whole idea that, that needs to be part of your budget, right? Even though we're self-employed, all the money cannot always just go back into the business. It has to be that you do your cost of doing business or whatever, your expenses, with that in mind, that you deserve a salary, you deserve to be paid. With Jody, you've got those people relying on you, but that doesn't mean that you're the last person to get paid. I think that's important too. It is easy to get, let's be honest, we work in an industry where there's a lot of fancy gear that's always coming out, and somebody tells you about a light or a backdrop, or even if it's just the regular turnover things of like a roll of seamless paper, by the time you have that delivered, that's a couple $100. We work in an expensive industry, to have that budget and say, okay, well, how much can I spend on replacing equipment on a yearly basis? I think that's important, because we buy a new camera every week, let's be honest, or a new lens. If money was no object, is it going to make you let you take better pictures? That's always questionable. But I think having a handle on where your budget is and where, are you actually taking a paycheck? That's an important thing. If it makes you happy to take your paycheck in the form of a new camera, well, you're kind of in a lucky position, that you're not paying the bills with that. But Apple's made it very easy. I just bought a new laptop after having bought a desktop last year, because they have that, the monthly payments, and you get 3% cash back. I heard they're not doing very well on that, probably because it's such an amazing deal. Because you just spread it out over 12 months, you don't pay any interest, and actually they give you extra money back. But I think being smart about how you make those investments is cool too. I don't like to put many of my business expenses on credit cards. I like to know what I have. As you said, Jody, I like, kind of budget ahead. But if Apple's going to give me free financing for 12 months, I'm taking advantage of that.
Well, I did take advantage of that also with mine, because
Yeah.
I'm like, I can save 3% and
Mhm.
for 12 months. And it's all paid automatically, so you don't even think about it,
No, you don't. No,
So-
they tell you exactly what to pay. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Mindy.
I was going to show the spreadsheet. So if you have the spreadsheet and it looks something like this, but if you want to save it for yourself, you can just go to File and then make a copy, and that'll put it into your drive as well, so that you can come back to it and manipulate the numbers as you want.
Thank you.
So the first thing when you're looking at the spreadsheet is kind of just work through it step by step. You probably won't have a lot of these expenses on hand. If you do, fantastic. We've left some space here so that you can always add in additional expenses as you go down. And then if you want to add more, you can always just add a line all the way through here and add extra, break it out further if you need to. So the first thing is for you individually as the business owner is to put in your desired yearly salary of what you want to make. So let's say it's 60,000, and I'm going to switch back over to the other screen. 1 second.
When I did this originally, I had to do like subscriptions, and I had to have 10 lines. Well, that was 10 years ago almost. So I'm sure my subscriptions is going to be like another spreadsheet with them all listed, and then it's just going to go right into that line. But
so let's say that your desired yearly salary for yourself is $60,000. This will automatically break it down into the monthly salary of what you want. And we could take the time and go through here and put it all together. I'm just going to put in some number that your studio's monthly expenses are $4,000. And that includes all of the insurance and liability and contractor expenses, hiring out for editing, all of your marketing. So here's an important thing is if you don't know what your marketing is because it fluctuates so much, this is where you can say, well, my goal is to save or set aside maybe $100 a month. That's, well, for the entire year, that's $1,200. That could be enough for your marketing. Maybe that's a little high, so 50. If you don't have, if an item is not a monthly fee, let's say your software for Photoshop or something is, you pay it off annually, or your CRM, you pay it off annually or every 3 years or something like that. Just take that amount and divide it by 12 months, or if it's like 3 years, by 36 months to get that amount. So we'll say that our monthly expenses for the studio is $4,000. So it's automatically going to put in the $5,000 for your monthly salary, the $4,000 for your monthly expenses. It's going to, for the entire month, the total expenses is $9,000. Now, this is where you have, how many hours do you want to work in your business? Do you want it to be a full-time business, 40 hours? You wanted to put in as 50 hours? Do you want to work only 30 hours a week? So your, oh, excuse me, desired working hours is the number of hours per month, not per week. So 160. Okay, this is where my numbers was off. So I thought the 4,000 was a little low, but my numbers weren't working right because I had put in per week. So let's say that this is $9,000 for your, that seems a little bit more accurate, at least for Jody's studio when I was working through it. So your studio hourly rate is $87.50, let's say a month, or an hour. So it'll automatically figure what your hourly rate is for your studio to operate. It means that that's the very bare minimum that you can be open, and you have to make that per hour to survive. So this also helps you. You're like, well, how much can I do a 1 hour photo shoot for? My bare minimum is $87.50. Is that right, Jody?
I think in this case
Yes.
with I think in this case with us doing photo shoots, it's not necessarily the number of desired hours, it's the number of desired photo shoots, or the number of desired jobs. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Because there are lots of hours that back end go into that, but you know, it's like if you do 10 photo shoots a month, then you know, and what does your average need to be in order to get that total expense? I think the hourly rate is a little tricky.
Yes, I agree. It is a little bit tricky to do that, but the part that does help is like, okay, if I know it takes me, it takes me 10 hours to design an album, and to download the photos and edit the photos, design the album, or like from start to finish, maybe it's not 10 hours, but if you can kind of time yourself one time when you're doing an album, then you can say, oh, it takes me 10 hours to do an album outside of the lab cost.
Mm-hmm.
So then I know that how do I even charge an album? So if it takes
Yeah.
10 hours, then you can add, multiply that with your hourly rate. And then you know how much it roughly is going to cost you in time. And we all know figuring out our time and what it's worth is the hardest part. So, it's easy to be like, oh, that's a $300 album from White House or Miller's or whatever it is. But the hard part is how much is it that you're actually, time wise is it taking? And I always, of course, estimate, and I always estimate up because I always shortchange really how much time it can take. And it's on average. Sometimes an album is a bear to do, and and you have a client who goes back and forth with you, but on average, that would help with that time part of it. But yeah, so go ahead and
So that's kind of gives you, and I realized again, my 9,000 is very low. So I was like, well, Jody tells me that our payroll every 2 weeks is about $5,000. So our employee payroll for the three of us is about $10,000 per month. So it's really easy. You're like, oh, I pay payroll of $5,000, but how many paychecks do you have per month? Approximately 2. So that's where you have to make sure that you put that amount in. And so you may have a separate spreadsheet, or if you have QuickBooks, you run your reports or whatever, that will help you, like, if you are itemizing your expenses as they come in and you're putting them into their specific categories, that'll really help you fill out this section here. So this is all great, but if you want to see how this applies to some products, the next tab across the bottom will help you figure out what a single product would be. So let's say we do an 8x10 print. So you don't have to fill the top section in. How many images in it is it? It's one image. And that kind of is important in the way that we do our pricing, is it's based on the number of images. If you had something here, let's do a different thing. Let's do a senior storyboard, because that one has, and it's a 20x20. And on our storyboards, we kind of do a 4-piece little collage. So there's 4 images on it. And then this is where, how long does it take you to edit one image? We do our own in-house final editing. And so we approximately found out that our processes take, maybe by the time you open the file, you edit the image, and you save and close it, it takes about 10 minutes to edit that. So this cell right here, this cost of labor, is automatically referencing that hourly rate that we have back over here. So if it takes 10 minutes, it's figuring out that it's going to take $100 in labor to edit that photo, times the 4 images. So one image is $25 to edit, but 4 images is $100. And then once you get the images edited, then you have to put them into the 20x20 metal print. Then you have to do the design work all around it. Let's say if you are recycling a storyboard, let's say that takes 10 minutes to change the font and the colors, and you're done. Now, this is where your product markup comes in. If, according to the PPA, Jody, I'll let you talk about that product markup part.
Okay, well, I don't know what the current standard is. We tried to find it, but when I was doing this, there's 3 different levels. So if you have, go to the first one, if you have no employees and no studio space, then the industry standard was to mark it up times 3, and there's like a percentage that is associated with that. But if you have either an employee or you have studio space, but not both, then you would mark it up times 4. And then the last standard was if you have both employee, plural or singular, and a studio space, then you mark it up times 5. And so that is, that was according to PPA, and we were trying to find it yesterday and just ran out of time. They may have changed their industry standards, but across the United States, you know, they survey all of us and figure out what those are. Does anybody have anything, an update on that? Anybody know more than me?
I always heard it was 5, but I haven't looked recently either, so I'm not quite sure. The last time I looked, I think that's what they were saying too.
Oh. So since I did this, at that time, I have always had like at least a part-time employee, and fairly soon in my business, I had rented a studio. So so I have both of those things, and even though I have my studio in my house now, I'm still paying rent to us personally. So you know, it goes to our mortgage, but still I'm paying rent, and so I always do my markup times 5.
So now this is the labor costs, this top part up here. So the 125 total, that's the labor cost to edit the photos, design the product. But then we have to take into the account the actual product cost itself. So this is where, if you're using, you know, White House or H&H or Miller's, whatever, if you use multiple ones, that might be something that's important to track so that you know where you're going to get that product. And then, of course, obviously the date, because prices are constantly changing, even with our labs. So when we first started doing storyboards, when I first started, even 3 or 4 years ago, the 20x20 metal print was just under $100. It's like $99 from White House. Now I'm pretty sure that a metal print, remember correctly, is somewhere between 125 and 135. So it's gone up significantly. So taking the lab cost, this cell here, the markup, is taking this lab cost times 5, and it's putting it into that cell there. Shipping, we have the free drop shipping with our lab, and then we take the product and we open it, we inspect it, we repackage it according with all of our branding, all of that stuff. That packaging material, not taking the time, the labor involved in that, that would be something else that we could probably add right up in here, because it takes at least 20 minutes to repackage a product. If it's not correct, then you got to send it back to the lab, and then you have all of that stuff. So that would be something else that you could technically add in up there if you want to. To repackage, it's like $10 for the materials to repack it. We've got our fancy bags and our stickers and all of that stuff. So our markup on the product alone is $7.25, plus the labor is $125. It automatically takes those two numbers there and puts them into this. So are the total price for our product, based on that hourly rate of 150 for the studio, it comes in at $850 for a 20 by 20 metal print with 4 images on it.
Now, so this is how I figured out all my pricing for products over the years. So then when I was listening to a White House thing, they said that Jed and Vicky Toffer had another way. When somebody quotes you like for a wall portrait, and only works for wall portraits, how do you quickly figure like if they want a custom size or something like that? Well, they're like, oh, well, you do the length times the width times 2.5. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if that actually worked. So it's pretty close. So that, and then if you're doing frames, it's length times width times 3. So I don't know how that works, if it's pretty close to the same. But if you did 20 times 20 times 2.5, that equals $1,000. So I mean, you can kind of see it's like pretty close to how that.
Well, also, these numbers are completely made up that I have on the screen, whereas the 2.5 that we have, that's actually more of our, for us, for our studio prices, a little bit more accurate. So then if you're like, okay, this is great, I don't want to have to do this for each one of my products and run through all of this. So I don't know if you noticed, but on both sheets so far, anything that you would fill in as the user of the spreadsheet is in green, so it has a green box around it. The yellow stuff is automatically populating. So green means go, fill that in. Yellow means don't touch it. I didn't put red on here because I don't want anybody to stop. So then you're like, okay, great. I have to fill out each one of these and then I have to delete all this stuff. No, you can also come over to the last tab that I have across the bottom if you want to look at this. And you again fix your prices, and then you can just add columns or rows as you go down for each one. So let's say that we do an album. This is our premium album, and it's a 10 by 10. Our premium albums have a max of 80 images. Obviously, we can always stuff in more images, but we sell our products based on images. Time to edit one image for an album is about 10 minutes to open, save, and close it. The design product, to design the product, it takes at least 60 minutes to put all the images in, get the cover, pick that, proof it all, make changes. Our lab cost for an album, I've just been ordering them for our premium albums with all the upgraded leathers and bindings and all that stuff, comes in around $325 or so. Shipping again is 0. Our packaging, we do a custom album, boutique album, and then we repackage it in our own branding as well. And so the album bag as well as the packaging comes in at about a total of $40. So our product markup comes in at
You have a math error there.
I do have a math error there. I am not referencing something.
So total markup, it'd be 1825 times 5, right? Or not your labor cost, but the
Oh, got that in there. Anyway, I'll check those numbers and reshare it. But
Yeah.
you can see that the final product, then you can just keep adding lines after lines if you want to.
Should be somewhere around 6,500 or 7,000.
Yes.
So,
Oh, you know
um,
what? I don't think.
so Mindy, thank you for
Yep.
putting that together. That's like a super spreadsheet that I could never do. But what do you guys use? I know Isaac, you have a specific thing. I know you do. You might have some. I know you
Sorry.
something we've talked about a way to do your product pricing. And you actually spoke about this.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you?
Yeah, we did an article in the Shutter magazine leading up to the year I spoke at Shutterfest, I think last year or the year before. And we designed kind of a spreadsheet like this that we gave away in my classes. It's similar. I would say it's not as clean since Mindy is the spreadsheet queen. But it's taken into account all those things, basically finding, I think the key to all of this, and obviously this pricing discussion is a whole thing we could probably talk for hours on. But the key to it is that basically per image price. It's so important that people throw that out the window. They don't think about per image. This is how I was pricing my albums incorrectly, is that it was just like markup on the product cost of the album, not take into account that there's 20 images, 30 images, whatever. And that was the one thing I try to drive home with people, is that like stop discounting like the per image price, and start there and go from there.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And I think another thing that people don't, they skip straight to the product pricing and they don't go through the unfun part of figuring out how much does it actually cost to run my business? Like, even how much do I want to make personally? Like, what's my salary? Where to start? Because that's really the starting point. Like, I've been to a lot of classes, they're like, this is how you can price your products and da 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 da. And I've even been to some White House ones where they're like, this is how you can price these products. But they don't start with, where's your studio budget? What do you want to make your family in the position that they want to be in? And so I think that's something that a lot of people miss.
Yeah, it was funny because in my class it actually got heated with some questions people were asking. And I'll say, like, I probably wasn't the most I wasn't the best at presenting this info because it's technical info. It's not like a fun topic where it's like, let's learn how to use a off-camera flash.
Yeah.
And so like people got mad at me, like, because they were like, but how did you come up with the per image price after I just explained how I did it? And they're like, but how did you get to that number? And I'm like, you have to decide what you're worth, what your time is worth, and punch that in. They're like, but how do you get there? I'm like, you just decide, what do you want to make, how much money do you want to make, and that's as simple as it can be.
Yeah.
One
Yes.
lady walked out of my class because she was so mad at me.
Wow. Wow. That was rude.
Yeah, so you guys should speak at Shutterfest.
Maybe we should.
Like I've been
we
telling
should.
you.
I know. I'll maybe have to apply for next year. I think
Yes.
they already got their people in line. Are you speaking again, Isaac?
Mhm.
He
Yep, it'll
is.
be
I
in
saw
April.
him on the website.
Yep, applications come out pretty quickly after Shutterfest happens, so be on the lookout. I'll send it to you. You guys need to.
All right, sounds good. I'd like that. I've never been to Shutterfest, so I have a friend in Missouri I want to go see, so that makes sense. So, Deb, do you have anything, or Janet or Lisa have any like spreadsheet that you've used or a process that you've used that specifically that you either could describe or share?
I don't have a spreadsheet to share, but I mean, kind of a similar process of, coming up with a per image price, and then like on albums, how long it takes me and then figuring out my time. And then calculating that in there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's basically what I've always done as well. So mine's not terribly formal.
No, mine isn't either. And I would say the one thing in that spreadsheet there is you don't necessarily have the creation of the creativity of the images themselves. It's like the processing of the images, which of course is separate from, you know, if they've maybe bought a package where they've got all the digital files, then that would apply. But if this is their the first and only thing they're buying, then there needs to be some kind of acknowledgement that they're paying for the creativity of each individual image, I think, in that spreadsheet. But
Yeah, and that could be something on if how you set up your fees. So like
Mhm.
I've always had like a session fee with a minimum investment. And
Mm.
so that way I could kind of separate like, but if you don't have that necessarily and you're like, okay, you're solely depending on the sale of the product to like pay for that creation of the images, then obviously you would need to count that creation part of it in your time before like downloading the images. It would need to be creation of the pictures, including like travel fees or, you know, all of that other stuff would need to be before that. I know that I make my session fees much lower, like it doesn't even cover my costs really. Because I do have the minimum investment that is due, which is a couple thousand. So I know that they're going to be spending that at least, and they have to pay that up front. So I've never figured that into my cost of products, the creation part of it, because I wanted to be paid up front that to cover everything versus even if they don't end up buying like an album or buying any products. I just want to make sure that I had enough to pay for those things. But yeah. But if like event stuff, you would have to do a different because you don't charge a minimum investment for like event things most of the time. I don't know, maybe you should. I don't know. But
Well, I guess for, I guess different events, there would be a minimum, charge for your services. Like you're not gonna leave your house for less than X dollars.
yeah, and if you were selling just the digitals for an event or like a branding shoot for a corporation or something, like you would have to be like, okay, that's going to be like a slightly different spreadsheet because you would have to charge, like you still are charging your download fee and to edit the photos and process all of them, even if there's no like physical products, you would still have to make sure it was worthwhile your time, and maybe that might change a little bit on how what you price it as, I guess. Yeah. Cool. Well, we are about out of time. We actually went over a little bit, but I think this was a great discussion and it was great to see all of you.
Yeah.
good to see you too. You look well, Jody.
Good talks.
Good to see you guys.
Yes,
great
you
seeing you all.
too.
Yes, Deb, fantastic to see you. Are you going to any conferences or anything like that?
You
I
were just in
don't-
California, right?
I
You
was
were
just in
California with
California.
Gretchen?
Yeah, that was great. When you were talking about Shutterfest, is that in April in St.
Mhm.
Louis?
Yep.
I'm a 17 Hats ambassador, and I've often thought I wouldn't mind because they will pay for, us to go to some of those things. And I'd love to go there. They always seem to be the first week of every month, which is a super, super busy week for me.
Yep.
So I am toying around with that, but I thought I might volunteer for Shutterfest. So we'll see.
If
No.
you do, that would be probably the most fun you'll have volunteering at a booth.
Yeah.
It's exhausting, the trade show style.
Yeah.
And I know this just because like I'm H&H ambassador and so
Yeah.
I've worked the floor with them sometimes, and it's just like there's huge spans of time that the trade show's open and people are constantly walking through. And
Right.
so it's a ton of fun because you got lots of interaction versus
Mhm.
sometimes the big trade shows, like maybe there's classes going on, so
Sure.
it'd be a fun time as far as
Yeah.
like being in the booth.
Yeah, I need to look at that, but I thought it would be fun. I definitely want to take advantage of some of those things because it's a good opportunity to get out and see some of that stuff. So yeah, but no real specific plans at this point.
Cool. Well, Mindy and I are headed to Sync later this month in a couple of weeks. So we'll be in Orlando. I liked it much better when they had it in Destin. Orlando's like
Mm.
too big. So
Uh,
Figure it out. Well,
but
yeah,
anyway, but it's what it is.
we're looking next year at maybe doing imaging just to try it up. And it's also in Dallas, so we will
Mm.
hopefully have free room and board with our sisters at her house. So
Yeah. And well, that imaging was what was just at the end of January, right?
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
flip it, they change it up every year. It's in a
Okay.
different city, and it floats around. It looks like from the beginning or middle of January until about maybe the end of the first week of February.
Okay.
For the next 3 years, it's all different times for imaging,
Okay.
and it goes Dallas, Nashville, and Charlotte.
Hmm.
So it goes
Yeah, I need
all
to
three
look at
different
that.
cities.
That was the weekend I was in LA this year. Otherwise, I would have tried to go do that one. I think it would have been
Mhm.
fun. So, but anyway, who knows?
Anyway,
Cool.
Well,
All
thanks,
right.
guys. This was cool. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're
yeah.
welcome. Thanks for joining us. Maybe
Everybody
next.
have an
Thanks for
awesome
all being here.
weekend.
Sorry, Lisa, say that again.
I said, everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks. You
You
too. Have
all
you
too.
settled into your new home?
Getting there.
Good.
Yeah, this is my first couple of nights by myself. But the first night I was shooting a conference. So that was fun. And then I've got a shoot this afternoon and then a wedding tomorrow. So I'm trying to stay busy.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wow. That's great.
Then settle
Right.
in when Mary Austin starts school. But yeah.
Good.
Glad
Okay.
you're doing well.
Yes.
Yep. It's good seeing all of you, and we'll look forward to next month.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Bye.